There are so many places that dentistry is expanding to really be able to say, I am a doctor because I can understand how all of these things are functioning as a whole. When you move into that realm, you get to start to be really creative. You get to start to solve puzzles. You get to start to have different conversations with patients, and you get to pull out of them, why are you here? What matters to you? How do you make decisions about your health? Where do you want to be in 50 years? How do you see yourself aging? Now we're talking about actually being a doctor.
Welcome to the Dental and Mental Podcast. I'm Dr. Galen Detrik.
I'm Dr. Davina Detrik.
And we are going to be talking to you about the business and the mindset of dentistry.
Welcome back to the Dental and Mental Podcast. I'm Galen.
I'm Davina.
And we recorded an entire podcast just a few minutes ago. And unfortunately, there was no audio.
Very problematic.
Very problematic. It's hard to have a podcast without audio.
I wanted to just ship it to you guys and let you figure it out.
30 minutes of our faces, you'd be like, my headphones are gone.
I just thought that'd be funny. Yeah, exactly.
You're like, finished it all up and we're like, how was that, Dylan? And he looked flustered. Weren't you flustered, bro?
A little bit.
He's in the back trying to move some wires. Meanwhile, Davina's like, are these things for real?
Well, I mean, it's a question to be asked,
Maybe
right?
they're
If
just
it didn't pick
props.
up any audio, then I feel like that's a fair question.
The whole thing's a facade, you know?
Well, whose life isn't? Anyways.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I got a different topic for you. We'll come back to the one we just recorded, but
We'll see.
we may not. Actually, knowing Davina, we may not. It'll be a mysterious podcast that never gets released. Okay. This is the topic. This is the idea anyway.
Okay.
So I'm out getting my tattoo, right? And designing it with June. And we sit there for 8 to 10 hours each session.
Well, you've never talked about June, so can you give us a little bit of context for, is this just
Sure.
a friend who tattoos?
So June Cha, Jun space CHA, is a very, very famous tattoo artist in Los Angeles. And he has an incredible Instagram. It's freaking awesome. And so actually I was looking for a very specific style of tattooing. I'd had this design in my head. It was it's very biblical, has a lot of this kind of like Roman and Greek type statuesque design to it. And everything I saw looked nothing like what I wanted. And so I was actually talking to Dylan, and Dylan's like, dude, have you seen this guy, right? Do you remember that, bro? And
A while ago.
this is a long time ago. This is like 2018.
It had to be a while ago
A
because
long time ago.
June's wait list is like 10 years.
Is
So
astronomical.
yeah,
So I was like, no, I haven't seen it. And so Dylan pulls up his phone, and I still remember where we were at the old house, and he's scrolling through, and I was like, that is 100% what I want. Like, that's it. So then I click on his link in his bio, and it's like a full application process and this whole like song and dance. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this is crazy. Like the last tattoo I got, I just kind of went to a person's place and we drew some things and slapped it on and went for it.
right.
And so to have this like application process, I was thinking this is why he's so good. So I fill it out, I complete it, and then I wait several weeks, hear nothing. And then all of a sudden I get an email back, and it says you were selected. Like, your idea is good enough for June to do it. So he basically chooses what he wants to work on. The story's got to be good enough. It's got to be fitting of his style.
Also, you cannot have an arm with any previous
Correct.
work, correct? Okay. So you
this
need
has
a
gotta
blank
be a blank
slate.
canvas.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he's got all these stipulations. And I actually was kind of into it. I was like,
Of
all right.
course you were.
All right, my man. I'm taking notes. So anyway, he's an obsessive type. So I complete the application. I hear back, and they're like, you've been selected. You've got it. Here's your dates. And so I read it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like within 3 weeks. This is crazy. I was like, I can't believe this is already happening. Like, I gotta get ready. And then I like stop for a second. I look again, and I'm like, wait a second. 2023. And I like kind of look at it, I was like, this gotta be a typo. But it was, I think I heard in like April. And my next date was May of 2023. And I'm thinking like, hold on, this is 5 years from now, like 4.5 years from now. And so I wrote Albert, his buddy and his concierge. I'm like, Albert, I think there might have been a mistake. It says 2023. Can you just let me know? Can we he's like, oh no, June has a almost 5-year wait list. I'm like, So that's the context for June. That's pretty much what you need to know.
Right. Yes.
That gives you kind of a bit of an idea of who this person is. Okay. And the way he rolls. I mean, he travels to Italy, and I think quite often actually, like to Japan, Italy. He does a whole bunch of, he just taught himself how to be a marble carving artist. I mean, like he's basically like a little Renaissance man, does sculpture. He does metalwork, right? We have a couple of rings from him and they're beautiful and incredible. He's a very stoic type guy. So everything about this is like, the memes. What's the meme that you were talking about? We're like, how often does your man think about the Roman Empire?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the Roman Empire.
Yeah, it's daily with June, We're thinking back all the time. It's great. So anyway, he and I are out there for a session, and we're talking, and finally we're starting to ink. And so I'm laying there on the table, and we're watching like a Jordan Peterson show or something like that. And he's like, well, tell me more about what you do. So I'm explaining to him about Thrive, I'm explaining to him about Vita. And the more questions he's asking, he's getting extremely intrigued / very frustrated. Like, it's just the most interesting experience right now. And he kind of stops and he's like, dude, your people, your doctors are in a doom loop. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, they're in a doom loop and they can't see it. And he like likens it to Plato's cave. Of course he did. And so I asked him to explain more. He's like, well, basically, and I'm hoping I paraphrase this correctly. He's like, essentially, you guys.
But you guys can't see him for a decade if you want to, so you'd never get to verify. So tell the story as you wish.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you'll never know. So he's like, okay, so basically you're taught how to think, which is very true. You're taught how to think, and then you apply that by working really, really hard, and then you achieve. And after you achieve, you feel this sense of loss because you're done achieving. And so then you indulge. And it's like very interesting because he has this it's like very stoic minded, but it's like deep level. This is the way a person or a human being works, right? It's the operating system. So you achieve, you get kind of disappointed. You feel lost because you don't have anything to strive for anymore. So then you indulge, and that indulgence makes you feel like shit. So then you go right back to thinking the way that you were trained to think, and then you work hard, and then you achieve, and then you feel disappointed, and it's like this loop, and you never get out of it. And he's like, "This is what you're trying to fix." It sounds like, and I was like, "That's exactly we're basically trying to start at the very, very beginning, teach you not how to think per se, right? Like this is the programmatic way, but how to be to give you intention behind what you do, right? It's more of a heart-based approach. It's more of an inspiration and intentionality. So I wanted to talk about it because I think this is an interesting. This is where Thrive tries to disrupt the pattern of that doom loop, and it's so interesting for a person who is not in our industry at all, who's a very successful businessman, who is
also creative.
I was just gonna say, is a creative person, much like we are with our own little techniques and skill sets and carving and curing and all that, because he does his version of that at a very high level,
right?
Exceptional level. And within minutes, he could identify exactly what's happening for dentists, right? It's like, what it helped me realize is that this is not rocket science. And yet we're so steeped in it that we can't see it. So we go through all these different courses and all these different little, hits. And that he used that phrase. He's like, these are addicts.
Right.
You're addicts to the educational system that you're brought up in. So I think it's just an interesting topic for us to talk about. What's happening in school, right? To get you to this place, because I think that's where it starts. It starts with this ABCD, choose multiple choice, insulated approach. We don't really know that it's happening, but we're getting programmed. So what do you see?
Well, for sure. I mean, that is 100% true, right? But dentists are an interesting group because they have that piece, which is being brought up in the education system. Then you get out, and if you are going into private practice, you are now pushed into entrepreneurship, which is the exact opposite.
100%.
Right?
Yep.
So now there's this weird world of, well, who's going to teach me the systematic way to build this business? And we talked about this a bit from the context of a business person who buys dental practices being absolutely mystified that dentists are people that have $1 million businesses and zero training to manage those businesses.
Right.
His commentary was, even somebody who buys Dairy Queen gets some business training, and yet you people are out here just
winging it.
Yeah, just
winging it.
just figuring it out as you go along. And so when you have a business-minded person saying that, it's like, no wonder we want to buy up dental practices. You idiots don't even know what you're doing with them. So let me buy them, let me flip them, let me actually make the money and generate the, revenue that this thing was always meant. Let me give you your comfortable salary and you fill your teeth, and I will handle the business aspect of it for you.
It's honestly why, I mean, trust me, there's no like love lost for me on corporate. I'm not trying to go that route. And at the same time, I don't judge them for what they do. I mean, most dentists have zero clue how to run a business effectively.
Right.
I mean, it's a very rare thing. To that point, you're never taught any form of risk. Everything's actually the opposite. It's every step for you in school is mapped out ahead of time, right? You've talked about this before. It's like,
which is so...
there is no deviation from the plan.
Right.
Just show up, do these things, and you'll get a certificate that says you're good to go. And then behind all that, I think probably the most universal value set that all of our classmates had, and that pretty much every dentist I've ever met, is you have some seed in you that wants autonomy.
Yes.
That's why you chose this field. Even in the smallest grain, that's like the connecting thread. So there's this baseline sub-desire. That's like internal programming, and layered on top of that is the exact opposite, right? This very mathematical, everything's inside this like box of theory. This is the way you do things. Then you get out, and that autonomy / the way you were taught / the way the real world works, none of that works cohesively. So you flounder.
Right. I mean, there's such duality for you as a person too, especially think about if you are financially responsible for yourself, which you are, a family, more people than that. You have a practice, you have a team. Mm-hmm. That starts to become a very scary thought to be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to try things. I'm just going to do me.
Let's see what sticks, y'all.
Right? Yeah. That becomes, there's a lot of people who are depending on you.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of mouths to feed.
Right. So that also starts to factor into your decision making as an entrepreneur, as a creative. And so the natural reflex is to pull back.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Dental and Mental Podcast and this topic resonated with you, we go so much deeper inside the Thrive Lab.
So if you too want to be copied but not replicated, come join us in the lab.
And just for you, because you listen to the podcast, if you want a full $1,200 off of the year-long subscription, just use coupon code podcast. There's a standard deviation in business ownership, especially in dentistry, that's pretty wide, right? It's a pretty big standard deviation, meaning you can not know how to run a business all that well, and you somehow limp along for a long time. You don't necessarily have to be a whiz at being a business owner, right? Which leaves all this wiggle room, all this cream on top, which is what corporates love. It's what private equity loves. They're like, this is inefficiently run, and yet it's still somehow profitable a little bit. Mm-hmm. So we'll come in, manage a few things, and we're going to just accelerate the profitability of this practice infinitely. And we'll pay you a nice little number that makes you feel good. Done.
Right.
Right?
Right.
It's an interesting dilemma. So talk a little bit about how you and I kind of came to this, because I think we were not immune to this. When you graduated, you had this sense of loss. You remember feeling that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I think you and I, at the core of who we are people who do not like to follow rules.
Hate rules.
Right? I think going to dental school, getting that degree for both of us was a vehicle to be able to do what we wanted.
Right.
It wasn't the end all be all now I'm safe, now I can relax type of thing. It was, now I can use this to do whatever I want and live however I want.
Even, I mean, this is a silly thing, but even getting a sleeve, I think pretty much every dentist I've ever talked to who's like, oh, I kind of want to get a tattoo too. They want to put somewhere where if I wear some scrubs, no one can see it. Not because that's where they wanted it. It's because that's what they think their patients can handle. And I was like, hell no. It's beautiful. It's art. Let's put it where people can see it.
Right.
And I remember Devin had that feeling. He's like, dude, you can't do that. Like, this is not a good idea. And I was like, well, then either I'm going to work for you and with you, or we're not doing this. And he was like, okay, well.
Right. When it's put that way, I guess here we
go.
And what has been the reception from your patients?
Oh my gosh. People love it.
Love
I mean,
it.
there are times where I'm sitting there talking to a person about their treatment and they're like staring at my arm. That's but they keep staring, right? It's because they want to ask something about it. And patients in general have, I mean, I'm not a single person said anything negative about it, but it's almost universal that people have said, that's beautiful. That's some of the most beautiful work I've ever seen. Like that fine line work. That's incredible. Love it. What's it stand for? What's it mean? It's a talking point.
Right.
You know?
What a great conversation starter. And I also think because of the care that you took with picking this out and the curation of this, it also leads to a lot of questions that have a lot of depth, right? Why did you pick that? Where did you get, like, there is such room for good conversation and connection with your patients over this.
Yeah. I mean, it was between this and just a giant butterfly right here, but you know, I chose, I think I chose right.
Right. Yeah. The butterfly wasn't a 5-year wait list.
Yeah. But I mean, actually to that point, going back to June and I have had conversations about that. I was like, well, what did you do? And he's like, oh, we all cut our teeth the same way. He's like, you're a tattoo artist, you know, you're doing the little butterflies, you're doing the, you know, a little verse, you're doing a little whatever, like these, he calls them sticker tattoos.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense.
Right?
Yeah. Right.
And he's like, I just got to a place where I realized I wanted to do bigger and bigger work that meant something. And he's like, and most people have a tattoo because they want it to mean something. It's associated with meaning. But he's like, I started having this process of asking them questions like I did with you that take them from a what it looks like to how it's actually going to get done to a why it's going to get done. And he's like, that why is what made me so fascinated. That's what he's always looking for, is what makes a person tick and why do they do the things that they do. Mm-hmm. So it fed into his authenticity and what he really wanted. And I mean, if you can do it with tattoos, you can definitely do it with a business that everyone needs. Like we talk about cosmetic dentistry being elective, but there's so many other things that you do in dentistry that are not elective. When you're in tattoos, like no one needs a tattoo.
Right.
It's completely elective, and yet he's thriving in what he's doing, and he's only done it more. You know, he's only been more successful the more niche he's been with what he wants for himself.
Well, a conversation, this may be irrelevant. We'll see where I go with it. But a conversation I was having with one of our private clients last week was this idea that dentists, I remember when this was coming around in New Mexico, where there was this ability for hygienists to do simple extractions, simple fillings, whatever it was, right? Yeah. And you had the dentists that were up in arms about it and were fighting about this, and it was the expanded functions hygienist. I'm not even sure where we're at with that because it's very irrelevant to my life, but it was, I just remember this being a big conversation.
It was.
Right?
Yeah. Like 5 or 6 years ago, right?
Yeah.
This is like a big thing.
Yeah. And I'm not even sure what states have it. But again, very irrelevant to my conversations because these are not the conversations we're having with our clients.
Right.
Right? Dentists who are worried about, can a hygienist do an extraction on a tooth with class 3 mobility? In my opinion, and this may be problematic to say, but maybe you don't deserve the title of doctor. Maybe you're not a doctor if we're worried about nonsense like that, right?
Right.
Now we're starting to see all of these advancements being made in dentistry. They're connecting the whole body with the mouth.
Right.
And there are so many places to go with sleep. There are so many places to go with development, with bone growth, there are so many places that dentistry is expanding to really be able to say, I am a doctor because I can understand how all of these things are functioning as a whole.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right? So the point of that, all of that is to say, is that when you move into that realm, you get to start to be really creative. You get to start to solve puzzles. You get to start to have different conversations with patients, and you get to pull out of them, why are you here? What matters to you? How do you make decisions about your health? Where do you want to be in 50 years? How do you see yourself aging? Now we're talking about actually being a doctor.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so I think that connects back to, what is your why? Are we worried about somebody, taking the $80 from pulling a tooth with class 3 mobility? Or are we actually digging into, why are you here? What are you offering? What are the things that you yourself as a creative are interested in when you start to fuse science and a person and solutions and technology? Like, that is a really cool conversation to be having right now.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Big time. You're talking about a frontier that's actually really relatively unexplored. And it's exciting to you and I. It's a huge part of actually what drives us with our courses and our master classes and all the educational programs within Thrive.
Right.
Right? Like, I love nerding out over where can we go next with these things, but I like tying it. And this is a huge, huge piece. This is actually this is the heartbeat of what we do. There's so much fun stuff to be done. There's lots of what's, just like June says, right? There's lots of what's. Now, how we're going to actually accomplish those things, that's a layer deeper. And then why we want those in the first place, the authenticity that drives you. That's the spectrum of the human being. So that's why your mindset work in coaching and that heart work and the relationships and the things that drive a human being, the philosophies behind what they do, what they believe, is so incredible. It's expansive. There's no end to it, which is really fun, right? Like, that's why you love doing this. You're like mining the depths of human beings, and they enjoy it because it's no longer just and it's no shade on a composite course. I teach composite courses. I'm also just very honest with myself that this isn't changing anyone's life. I can teach you how to do something, and it's actually fairly easy to do, and put a little practice in and all the rest, great. It's just not going to change. Let's not church it up. Not changing a person's life because of that thing. We say this all the time.
No, but I will push back and say, I think what can change a person's life about teaching a composite course is what you and I had talked about a couple weeks ago, which is having a teacher make you fall in love with something. I think that is transformative.
That's true.
Maybe not the, learning how to do a class 4, but I think we've all had those moments where you have a teacher who loves something so much and their interest in the thing makes you interested. And from there, it does become a gateway drug into more creativity.
Yeah, that's actually that's a good point.
Right?
That is a very good point.
I think we've all had that before.
Yeah, there's the word inspire, it kind of gets lost, I think, in terms of its meaning, but to breathe life into something is really what you're doing. And there are so many topics that are boring until you find the right teacher. And then it's like, oh my gosh, it just completely came alive. I think you were actually making the point that every topic could be absolutely boring unless you had the right person breathe life into that thing.
Yeah, I do. I really do believe that, because right now we have access to information about anything.
Right.
But a person who can make you feel something about a particular topic that you're trying to learn something about, that to me is still very rare.
Is actually a full circle. When you and I talk about our marriage, in our relationship, think about so this whole conversation is really about programmatic thinking versus a much more expansive way of thinking and believing. Actually, I would say it's more belief. It's like programmatic thinking and inspirational or expansive belief. Two opposite ends of the spectrum. We are taught how to think because these are things that have been done, right? So it's pretty finite. Now think about a marriage or a relationship. Most of what people hear is like, that's the end point. You get married and that's the end point, which is why so many of the memes and so much of the talk and all the rest is like ball and chain, life came to an end. I do 75% less golf now. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's all these things. There's like, well, now it's over. Versus, I think the way you and I have, and which we subscribed to for a time, that's what we knew, until we started doing a lot of work and spending some money and all the rest to think a different way about it. And finding people who were like, marriage is amazing. It's the most incredible, not destination. It's a journey that you get to just keep learning more and more about how to be a better servant, how to understand that person more, what they get to kind of carve away at you and to make you better. You get to build a life together. You get to parent children together. So much that was like, man, this is expansive, not finite.
Right.
Same concept for a dentist. I think we're taught what has been done, which is, if anything, that's the reason why so many of the courses out there bore me. It's like, even if it's a new idea, if you don't take it beyond the thing, the what, it's going to be dead in a couple of months, a couple of years. Like, it's just that's it. You have to go deeper. You have to. And that's really what you and I love the most, is giving them, and that's why I say belief. Belief is something that you can't see.
I think that the depth is also how you and I have been able to find our people within Thrive. The people who come to Thrive have a desire for that as well. And I also think it's why the practices that people create with the things that we teach look nothing alike. You can find people who have coached with us, worked with us, been through courses, and they build very differently. They may have similar approaches to things as far as value, right? Getting to their why, but their whys may be different. And so the natural output of that is their practices look very different. The things that they build look very different.
Right.
But the depth, they both have depth.
Yeah.
They both have a lot of weight to it. There is a purpose to it. There is a excitement around what they're building, how they're building it, who they choose to build it with. But the practices themselves do not look copy and paste.
So yeah, I think that the unifying factor for our practices and our practitioners is an underlying value or belief system, right? That dictates then the character with which they build.
Yes.
But the what can change dramatically. Like, for example, the whole thing that June and I worked through, remember, it was before Italy. And I go out to LA, I'm sitting down with them, and Davina fully expected, I was there for 3 days before flying to Atlanta to pick you up and fly to Italy with our friends. And so our friends and Davina are like, oh my gosh,
we can't wait to see your tattoo.
I can't wait to see this tattoo. And like thinking it's all going to be done. I show up with 0 ink, nothing at all. And I was like, it was the best time. We just talked for 3 days. And you and Hashem were like, that sounds like hell.
Oh my gosh, that sounded terrible to me. I'm like, where's the result?
Yeah, I need it. Yeah. But it was fascinating because those 3 days are that. He's like, what do you want? Okay, now how are we going to do it? And actually, let's start with the why. Was truly like 20 hours of drilling down. Like it was difficult to give that because I would give him something. He's like, that's not quite it. I know it's not based upon what you said. And so it was just drilling until we got down to the base, which I haven't told anyone, but this is what it came to. He's like, it needs to be a sentence that you can say. And it has to have that kind of like, oh, I really believe that. And so hopefully I remember this. It's remember my soul to be steadfast in faith, hope, and love, despite what suffering or success may come. And when the more we like went through the design of the tattoo, is like, that's what I'm trying to remember. That's what I'm trying to tell myself. Is if I'm high or if I'm low, there is a value set that I subscribe to that is going to be my heartbeat for life, right? And that no one's ever done a process like that with me before for something like that. I just love that is, I think for our clients and for our doctors, that's what they have. They come out of it with that.
That's 100% true. And I will say, because they have that, this is true for you and I. This is true for Dylan. This is true for Thrive. And it's true for our clients. Because we have that, people have come for every single one of us trying to rip things off.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, I have something to say about that, but continue. Yeah.
They try and duplicate that. But because you don't have your soul anchored into that, your heartbeat isn't anchored into that why, Yeah, you listening right now, you can rip off our content and it's not going to land the same.
Not going to land.
We've given you a lot of leeway, but don't
Give you a
think
lot of inspiration.
don't think we don't know and don't see, and it hasn't been brought to our attention. But that's the baseline, is that we know that you can't replicate that because you don't think or believe or have spent that much time in the same way. Our clients are the same way. The practices that they're building, people try and rip them off as well because it's so attractive, but that is the missing piece. And so they can't replicate it no matter how hard they try.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We've got a lot of people who have copied content directly, techniques and protocols directly, our branding, our creativity, things we do with Dylan.
His work, they've copied his
major
work.
Corporates that have done that.
Right.
Right? Those are coming from the top. They see a what and they think, I'm just going to copy that what. But they never, like you said, go down deeper. Because we focus on this, the why, the doctors that we have all look so different. And it comes from an original place of original creativity. And I think that's actually probably the thing that is the coolest, because the only credit we can take is that we got the chance to work with you and ask you questions and cause you to think a different way, to basically throw out the programming and let's get back to who you really are. From there, it's all them. We can't take credit for that.
Exactly.
That's their own creativity.
Yep.
And I also think that that's why at the base level, if you start with that place, there's no end to it. Like you can take my statement, you could do a million different iterations of how you would design that, but they all come back to that same place.
Right.
Right. Versus the other way, if I show you this, you're like, well, how do I do it for myself? You're going to make it look really similar. Right. And you'll never get to that core. So it's just an order of operations.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Well, as you say, I think we're done with this topic.
I think we're done with this topic. But I will say, if this conversation resonated with you, then you are probably a really good fit to be in Thrive.
Yes.
Right? If you're not already, get yourself into lab. These are the type of conversations, these are the type of teachings that we're having. And these are the types of things that you get to implement within your own practice so that you too can be copied but can't be replicated.
I love that. Can be copied but not replicated. I love it. That's perfect. All right, guys. We'll catch you in the next episode.
Bye.
Thank you for listening and or watching the Dental and Mental Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode or any others for that matter, feel free to tap that subscribe button on YouTube, Apple, Amazon, as well as Spotify. While you're there, why not leave us a review, up to 5 stars? And if you're on YouTube, go ahead and leave us a comment. Let us know what topic you want us to discuss next.
If you like what you heard today and you want to be involved in the Thrive world, from coaching to courses or just to connect with us, go to thethrivedentist.com.